Fiat Lux. Lovely. Initiation into Hermetics, a practice of magic, by Franz Barden. Impregnation of the astral body with the four divine fundamental qualities. When the magician has arrived at this stage of development, he will begin to express his concept of God in concrete ideas. The mystic, being trained one-sidedly only, or a yogi, etc., sees in his deity nothing else but a mere aspect to which he renders worship and adoration. The truly wise adept, who always considers the four elements in his development, will represent the concept of God in four aspects according to the laws of the universe, namely the omnipotence corresponding to the fire principle, the omniscience and wisdom belonging to the air principle, the immortality with the water principle, and the omnipresence with the earth principle. On this level, it will be the magician's task to meditate about these four divine ideas, aspects, in turns. Deep meditations, in a way, enable the magician to exercise directly with one of these divine virtues, fusing with it in such a manner that he feels himself to be the virtue in question. He has to experience the same with all the four virtues of his God. The arrangement of the exercise is his own business. That means he is allowed to meditate on one of the virtues for so long until he becomes quite certain that the respective virtue has become personified in him. He may perform the meditations according to his spare time, in the manner that through meditation he recalls all the virtues in turns in one exercise. The meditation has to be so profound, so pervasive, and so convincing that the astral body becomes, as it were, identical with the virtue. The magician's concept of God is universal, including all the four divine virtues according to the universal laws. The magician should, therefore, give his keenest attention to these meditations because they are absolutely necessary to realize this union with his God. As soon as, after long and deep meditation, he is capable to form an exact idea of these four divine virtues, he has ripened so far as to establish that connection, the practice of which will be described in the last step of this lecture. These meditations are producing a kind of deification of the magician's spirit and soul, and finally they will influence his body in an analogous way, enabling him to establish the union with his God, which is the sum and substance of this training course. Magic Physical Training 9. By continued practice in this course, the scholar has been led a great distance on the way to a state in which there is no more need of a special training of the body. From now he will have to intensify the powers he did develop so far and to use them in various ways. Below I will give a number of instructions which the scholar can follow without any effort according to the measure of his development. Treatment of sick people with the help of the electromagnetic fluid. It is a beautiful and sacred work to help the suffering mankind. The magician is capable to do miracles as far as the treatment of the sick is concerned, but as so many saints did in the past and are still doing in the present time. Not one of the lay practitioners, magnetizers, or healing mediums will ever understand to release the dynamic powers corresponding to the primary principles in the same marvelous way as the magician does. The presupposition here is, of course, that the magician does know the occult anatomy of the body with respect to the elements and their positive and negative effects. Otherwise, any influence on the seat of the disease would be quite impossible. With the help of the Akasha principle and his clairvoyant eyes, the magician will immediately recognize the cause of the illness and be able to influence the roots of the illness. When the origin of the sickness happens to be in the mental sphere, the magician first of all has to influence the mind of the patient to restore the harmony. As I did mention before, the astral sphere can only influence the astral plane, exactly as the material sphere influences the material plane only. This fact must always be kept in mind. Any transmutation from one plane to the other can only be accomplished with the help of the corresponding matrix, or the connecting link of a more subtle power. A thought can never produce any physical power nor cure any physical ailment. But a thought which has been concentrated on faith and conviction can cause strong vibrations in the mental sphere of the patient, which are conveyed to the astral body via the mental matrix. An influence like this does not reach farther than to the soul of the patient. This induces the patient to set his mind on the healing process, thus producing the vibrations which are necessary for recovery, but nothing else. Evidently, a sort of mental astral palliation can be accomplished. The patient himself will mentally cause the acceleration of the healing process, but this influence on the material ailment is not sufficient, especially if the patient is already lacking such an amount of internal strength that the fluids necessary for the healing cannot be renewed. Therefore, the success would only be a very trifling one, and the recovery subjective. To this category of healing methods belong suggestion, hypnosis, self-suggestion, faith healing, and so on. The magician will not exactly underrate these methods, but on the other hand, he will not rely on them, using them merely by way of a makeshift. By no means will these methods represent to him so high a value as it is described in numerous books. More spectacular will be the work of a true magician who has got a great surplus of vital magnetism by occult training and a corresponding line of life. He does neither need the patient's faith nor any kind of suggestions, hypnosis, nor an aureole. 2 words I need to look up. A magnetizer like this loads his vital power with the help of his own surplus into the astral body, if necessary, even against the patient's will, and this way does accomplish a faster recovery because his magnetism has a strong stimulus, thus strengthening the astral matrix of the patient. Therefore, a magnetopathist, yes, I'm sticking with that. Therefore, a magnetopathist can treat very successfully a child too, who neither through his imagination nor his subconsciousness can contribute in any way to further healing process. It has turned out quite differently if a magician specialized in the healing line treats hundreds of patients daily without his vital force diminishing in the least. A magician makes use of the universal laws and touches the sick physical organ directly with his influence, without passing first through the astral body together with the matrix. This is the reason why a magician has a much stronger influence on the sick organ than all the healers known up to date. The healing process can, in certain circumstances, happen so fast that it can be regarded as a miracle from the standpoint of the medical science. I do not intend to prescribe any general rules to the true magician for the treatment of the sick, because I am sure that he already has his personal method of working based on the laws he did learn. It will be sufficient to give a few useful hints to him. The magician works with the willpower and the imagination when the patient suffers from a mental weakness or disturbance, and the harmony has to be restored. Here the magician has to be fully aware of the activity of his spirit, so that not his astral or physical body, but his spirit alone does activate the influence. Therefore, the keenest attention is paid to the spirit, body and soul must be completely neglected Therefore, the keenest attention is to be paid to the spirit. Body and soul must be completely neglected in order to intensify the effect from spirit to spirit. For example, if the patient happens to be in agony or in a state of deep unconsciousness, the magician will be able to bring the patient round again. If the cause of the disease is to be found in the astral body, the magician will work with the accumulation of the vital power, which he impregnates with the desire of a quick recovery. He will convey the accumulated power from the universe into the astral body of the patient without allowing the vital power to go first through his own body. By doing so, the magician avoids any weakening of the own vitality and at the same time a mingling of the patient's morbid odd with his own one. The patient's morbid odd with his own one. If the causes of the illness are of physical nature, and if any organ in the body has been affected, the magician resorts to the elements and to the electric and magnetic fluids. If the patient happens to be of a strong constitution, the magician will work with elements only which have a favourable influence on the sickness. Thus, he will fight a high fever with the element of the water. The element concerned will produce the necessary fluids, electrical or magnetical, by itself, and a line of conduct, a regime kind of breathing, herbs, baths corresponding to the element will be prescribed for the patient. But if the body of the patient has already become so weak that it is unable to accept the necessary element and consequently to produce the corresponding fluid, there is no other way out for the magician but to load the sick organ directly with the fluid. Here the occult anatomy according to the polarization has to be observed carefully. Any organ performing the function of the magnetic fluid must never be loaded with the electric fluid in order not to harm the patient. In organs where both fluids are at work, the magician will do well to introduce the fluids successively. Supposing he wants to exert an influence on the head by fluids, he will load the front part, the forehead, the left side and the inside, big brain, with the electrical fluid. The right side, however, of the head and the back of the head, small brain, with the magnetic fluid. If the magician works by passing his hands on the patient's bodies, which is quite a good expedient, but not at all necessary, he will perform this act in accordance with the fluid. With reference to our example, head, he will influence the forehead and the left side with his electric, that is, his right hand, the back of the head, and the right side with his left magnetic hand. A magician who is extraordinarily well trained in the healing practice will neither have to resort to any kind of strokes nor to passing his hands on the patient. He can accomplish everything by means of his well-developed imagination. He must understand how to lead the magnetic or the electric fluid with the help of the imagination into the smallest organs as well. That means he must be able to direct the magnetic fluid, say, into the inner part of the eyes, or the electric fluid into the edge of the eyeballs. In this manner, he will not only successfully treat many eye complaints, strengthen the visual power, but he will also be capable to make the blind see again, provided that the blindness has not been caused by a structural defect. The neutral parts of the body are therefore to be loaded whether with the elements belonging to the respective region of the body or with the accumulated vital power. It would not be too serious a drawback neglecting the neutral parts at all, because the irradiation of the fluids will influence the neutral points of the organs indirectly too. On the chance that not only one single organ is concerned, but that the whole body has been affected, as in nervous diseases or diseases of the blood, the electric fluid has to be led to the entire right side of the patient's body, and the magnetic fluid to the left side. If, after the successive conveyance of both the fluids to the patient's body, the latter is no more receptive enough, the elements can be accordingly led to the regions of the body. Any extreme dynamic accumulation of elements inside a sick body is to avoid, because the patient will not agree with such a stimulus. Sip. This is thirsty work. The most efficient magic healing process consists in successively influencing the patient's spirit, soul, and body accordingly. Based on the mentioned examples and the analogous universal laws, the magician ought to know how to proceed without a particular hint. Answering this question, whether an expert and duly trained magician would be capable to completely heal every kind of diseases, even the most incurable ones, it may be said that the magician has in fact the possibility to cure even the most malignant illness, providing that none of the organs in the body is missing. But the magician will read in the book of fate, Akasha, how far he is allowed to intervene, because certain ailments depend on karmic conditions. That means the patient has to atone for this or that omission in his present or his former life by suffering the illness. If, however, the magician feels a call to act as a means to an end, healing or alleviating the sickness, or to cure it completely, which the truly wise magician can read in Akasha too, he will work astounding miracles based on these instructions, considering the universal rules. The highest adepts who ever walked on our globe and brought about the most fabulous healings, resuscitations of the dead, etc., could do so only by considering the universal laws, their powers and fluids. And here it did not matter at all whether the realizability of their faith did play any part, consciously or unconsciously, or if the living word, Kabbalah, has been the important factor. It does indeed depend on the magician's degree of development, how far the miraculous healings can reach. Franz Barden's Initiation into Hermetics.